And she's like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I'm not staying there without you. And I was like, well, I'd love you to come be my first employee. I was like, whatever you make, I'll pay you. I have no idea about health insurance. You got to do all that stuff. I literally know nothing. Wow. She's like, okay. And I was like, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to the office tomorrow. You're going to tell them, but they're going to, not be happy, and they're going to talk bad about me, and they're going to escort you out. All of the above happened. And so then she shows up at my townhouse, and she's like, well, now what? Like, do you have all the files? And I was like, no. And she's like, do you have any of the players' contracts? I was like, no. I literally had nothing. Yep. I was like, I have a legal pad, I have a calculator, I have a phone. What do you need? She's like, well, we got to go to Staples. So we go to Staples, literally right behind my apartment. And we get a cart, and she starts putting things into the cart. As she's putting them in, I'm putting them back on the shelf. I was like, well, why do you need 2 highlighters? Why don't we start with this? My money. I got no money. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to go off of whatever. So I'm literally putting things back as she's putting them in.
Welcome back to another episode of the Athletes First Family Podcast, quarterback series. I'm Brian Murphy, CEO of Athletes First, here with AJ Stevens, my co-host, arguably the best negotiator in our industry, although today's guest may disagree.
Thanks, Murph. Happy to be back on the podcast where we discuss Athletes First success at representing quarterbacks. For our new listeners, Athletes First currently has $1.4 billion of NFL contracts for quarterbacks on the books. It's the most for any agency, and it includes 3 of the top 5 paid quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Including, of course, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, Dak Prescott, who was represented by none other than Todd France. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Oh, this is the podcast we've all been waiting for. It's always great to have a legend join us, right, AJ?
Oh, yeah.
And, usually, Todd, when we start these, we start with your background and start from the beginning, go to the end. But I think, I'm at least so excited to have you here. I want to share with our listeners, I have AJ share with our listeners, like, just give them the stats, give them the digits, give them the numbers, the numbers that make the legend, which is, as I know, extremely hard.
Unprecedented.
Almost impossible.
He's represented 83 Pro Bowlers and had multiple Pro Bowlers every year since 2011.
More than 90% of the industry combined.
I don't know if that's true, but
let's go with it.
Yeah. He's negotiated the deal to make a player the highest paid offensive and defensive player at the exact same time. Another unprecedented.
Who are those players?
Aaron Donald, Dak Prescott, exact same time.
Got it.
And he's negotiated the deal to make a player the highest paid at his position at every single position on the football field, except for kicker, punter, and long snapper. But we're working on those, I'm sure.
That's amazing. And you describe an agent, a legend, a super agent, Forbes #1.
And there's that too. He's been either #1 or #2 on the Forbes list every year that they've done the list since 2018.
And you're talking about a guy that if an agent, if you're not working with him, if you're not on his team and you don't know him, you really don't like him, right? I mean, you resent him. He gets all the players. You assume that he's an asshole, just not a guy you want to get along with. That's what you tell the recruits that he's at,
This is a family podcast.
That's my first cussing nine, but that's when you're not working with Todd, that's how you feel, right? But then you go out and you meet Todd and this is a super agent, right? Because he's a husband, a wife, 2 little girls, one of the funniest guys. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and just we're lucky to have him. So, Todd, we know you love podcasts and talk about yourself, so thanks for joining us.
No, listen, I'm glad to be here. I just wish the introduction would keep going. It's just great. Honestly, I didn't know all those stats. I've never compiled them myself, so I'm not sure if they're all accurate or not, but I'll take them.
Yeah.
If anything, you guys underestimated, but that's okay.
Well, that's the introduction you wrote for us to say. And
no, I actually did not write that. It's not true. No, it is not.
No. I'm fired up. This is awesome to be here. So today's podcast, Todd, we kind of want to tell them a little bit about how you went from, growing up to being a super agent, #1 on Forbes, and kind of start with the beginning. Like, where did you grow up, and did you play sports in high school? And
yeah, I grew up in Chicago for the first 17 years of my life, or 16 years of my life, and then moved to Atlanta. Played sports, basketball, tennis, soccer, everything you can do, and ended up moving from, like I said, from Chicago to Atlanta my junior year of high school.
All right. And then where did you go to undergrad?
Went to University of Alabama.
Okay. And what was the reason for that?
Well, family had just moved to Atlanta, and so wanted to not really think about going back to maybe a Big Ten school. If I stayed in Chicago, I would have probably done that. Yep. But I've been far from the family, so very close to my family, and so wanted to check out a school closer to me. And actually, my older brother had graduated high school in Chicago. Okay. Had scholarships for tennis everywhere. And my father, through his company, had a connection at Alabama, wanted him to go at least check it out. So he goes to Tuscaloosa. My brother sees the campus, sees all the other beautiful things that are there,
Sure.
and decides, let's go talk to the tennis coach, gets a scholarship, ends up not going to Big Ten school on tennis, and instead goes to Alabama.
Oh, wow.
First college younger brother as a junior in high school visits is his older brother at Alabama. And that's ultimately how I ended up at Alabama.
Awesome. So it had nothing to do with a sports management program or anything.
No, nothing to do with anything that actually matters. No.
All right, good. And then, we talked to like Justin, one of our other partners, and Ryan, and when they went to college, they knew they wanted to be sports agent or in the sports industry. Like, when you go into college, did you want to be a sports agent? Has it been a dream of yours, or didn't even enter your mind?
No, I always loved sports, just like a lot of people do. I really thought I was going to go work for my father in his business in the advertising and media magazine publishing business. That's why that was my major, advertising. But it ultimately ended up working out differently when I got out of school.
Yeah. So your dad, very successful in the advertising world, very a creative genius, has a lot of great stories. Would be a great podcast guest, actually. But so you graduate from Alabama. You don't go work for your dad. What do you do instead?
So, he wouldn't let me work for him or my brother work for him straight out of school. And so I got an internship working for the Atlanta Knights, a minor league hockey team. And yes, it was wild. And then the Atlanta Knights bought a roller hockey international team called the Atlanta Fire Ants. And I was tasked to go be corporate sales for the Atlanta Fire Ants, and I crushed it. I had Billy Bob's Pizza Circus as a client, Roswell Roller Rink. I got the Children's Hospital as a sponsor with the helmets for ice skating and all that stuff. And so I was doing well. And ultimately, what happened was, when you work for a team, you're at the stadium all the time. So I'd be at the stadium early. I knew the nacho people. I knew the police officers. I knew everybody in the stadium. And my father, he told me, he's like, when you're an intern, you either dress like an intern, get treated like an intern, dress like you own the company, get treated like you own the company. So he brought me 3 shirts, 3 ties, 3 jackets, 3 pants. He's like, you got 9 here, mix and match. And so when I was doing the internship, I had told the guy in the interview, I was like, look, I'm fine financially. I'm okay not getting paid. I just want real experience though. Like, I'm not delivering tickets. I'm not going to be a mascot. He happened to be from Ohio. He loved my Chicago mindset. He was like, you'll be my sales assistant. You'll stand right next to me, do everything with me. So I did that. And I was in the arena one time before a Hawks game. And I guess I was just, 22 years old, just walking around, and a guy walks up to me and says, what do you do? Who are you? And I was like, I'm Todd, like, what do you mean? But, I have no idea who this guy is. And he tells me who he is. And at the time he represented most of the NBA head coaches. And he said, I've got a company. We represent the Hawks head coach. I'd love you to come talk to us. We're hiring a marketing person. And so I was like, sure. Wasn't looking, wasn't anything. And ultimately went and met with him and got a job. And
why did he pick you out of the blue like that?
He said he noticed me walking around, and he's like, he wanted to know who I was because he said, you knew everybody, you're talking to everybody, you're walking around the floor of the basketball arena, and I don't know who you are yet. I'm very connected. And it's just like, who is this young guy working the scene? And that's kind of what I was doing.
That's
so walking around looking like he owns the place is not something new. This is something he's always done, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's accurate, AJ. And let's not forget that, okay?
Well, he does own the place. Yeah, we're going to get to that. That's the end of this podcast. But okay, so you go work for, who was the guy and what was the company?
It was called Career Sports Management back in the day, and I think it's changed since then. I got a job. I was the 4th employee there, and I was given a phone book. There was no computers. Oh, yeah. I was given a phone and a client list, and it was go get these guys endorsements. Wow. And I started calling on companies, and next thing you know, I'm getting guys deals. And then I was dealing with companies and getting deals for guys that weren't our clients. I was calling literally a celebrity person who has a network. So I could bring a deal to them. I brought deals to Steve Kerr back when he was on the Bulls because he was cheaper than Pippen and Jordan. So people would use him. I brought deals for Jay Novacek when he was on the Cowboys and all that stuff. Juwan Howard when he was in the NBA, all these guys I was doing deals for. Ultimately started building the company and growing, and ended up having 30, 40 people underneath me in marketing and sales.
Wow.
I was doing things in NASCAR. I sold title sponsorships to race cars. I was negotiating title sponsorships for cars and doing race car programs. I was doing retail promotions, literally coast to coast, giving away Ford Thunderbirds, where you would have a tear pad and rip it off and
Yeah.
enter to win. I had like 50 promotions going on coast to coast at any given time, whether it was win a chance to go to Disney World with Jay Novacek or play basketball with Dennis Scott, like all these different kinds of things. And then I incorporated a lot of our clients. We represented John Smoltz, the Braves pitcher, and did a lot of deals for John as well, and Mark Lemke, the Braves, during their heyday when they were winning all the World Series. So I ultimately did that. And like I said, I was there at that point. It was I was there a total of 8 years, age 22 to 32.
Wow.
And if you want the rest of the story is I ultimately went to the owner of the company and said, I want a raise. I was very close with him and I felt like I deserved a raise. And he said, what do you want? I was like, I have no idea. Whatever you think's right. Literally would have taken anything. He, I guess, thought I was negotiating and wanted my number. So I went and talked to my dad, put a proposal together, gave it to him. And it was, well, I forget what year it was, but I'm still waiting to hear if I'm going to get that raise. Let's just say that. And so ultimately at the end, I decided to leave the company on August 23rd, 2003.
Okay.
And I left and was going to start my own company.
Wow. So
Actually, let me back up. I correct myself. 2 years into prior to leaving. So I was there 10 years. On the 8th year, I wanted to make more money. So I went to the owner first to say, let me start representing athletes because that's where the real money was in contracts and it wasn't marketing. He's like, well, I was like, my true love is basketball. So let me go do basketball players. At the time, it was a conflict of interest. We had represented coaches. You couldn't do players. So he said, well, maybe baseball. And I was dumb at the time. I should have done baseball, but I didn't understand things. And so I was like, I don't want to chase high school kids and I don't, want to do all that. And so ultimately we landed on, fine, you can do football, but on your own time.
Wow.
And nights and weekends. So literally on nights and weekends, I never played football. I never wore a football helmet, nothing other than flag football as a kid. I self-taught myself the business and went out and recruited and signed 17 players in about a year and a half, 2 years.
Wow.
And so that's when I then went to the owner of the company and after 10 years asked for the raise, didn't get it, and ultimately decided I was going to leave and go on my own.
And so 2001 is about when you started doing the football thing.
Yes, got certified in 2000.
Yeah. So before you get to that, so the first 8 years you're there and you're doing all these great marketing, who's teaching you how to do those concepts?
Nobody, honestly. I was just winging it. You have to have the work ethic. You can't be taught that.
Right.
And that's in the blood from my dad and all that. So I was just grinding and building and trying to get deals done and making things up on the fly. Some things I learned from just working for the hockey team in their sponsorship area, and then try to apply the team concept to the actual individual athlete concept. Yep. Because I obviously didn't have a team anymore. I now had players and just got creative and went out there and started doing all that stuff. And that's how it built.
Now, 24 years later, as we sit here now, right? You've done everything, you've seen everything, but is it safe to say you're still making stuff up as you go in a good way, like creatively?
1,000%. Yeah. I feel like I create my own problems and I create my own work, and the people that work with me closely every day know that. I'm always pushing the envelope for new ideas, how to do more for the players, how to do better, how to do different ideas, how to think outside the box and do more and different than anyone else is doing.
Yeah. Have you seen that, AJ? I mean, you work closely.
Yeah, no, it's in every negotiation. We always say every negotiation is completely different, but it also becomes completely different because Todd will come up with this random idea as to how we're going to attack the negotiation strategy. And it's one of those things where you're not really sure where it comes from. And he throws so many things at the wall that it's maybe just a matriculation throughout the years. But it's definitely a lot of creativity all the time.
Or how about, Todd, tell him about the Mental Health Day t-shirts that you did.
Oh, yeah, we had for World Mental Health Day, I forget, was it October? I forget the date, somewhere in October, but we had I found out there was World Mental Health Day and was talking to my brother-in-law who had a relationship with a mental health organization. And it was it's called Hug My Bro or Hug Your Bro. Yeah. And I ultimately went to him, I was like, hey, could we do something with that group where for our own players, because mental health is such a big deal, in the world, in our NFL world. Yep. And slowly but surely, players have come out and talk about mental health. So I thought it would be a cool idea as an agency if we could partner with Hug Your Bros, do t-shirts for all of our guys that say Hug Your Bros, send them out to all of our players just as hey, we're thinking about you, and put all the resources out there that you could go to if anyone's having issues, and whether the NFLPA had listed, all sorts of different resources and hotlines and all that type of stuff. I think it was a great thing. And the agency did that. And we sent it out to 500, all the players, coaches, NIL guys, just everybody got it. And it was a really cool, kind of a feel good thing to do.
Unbelievable response. But that kind of point to even now you're an equity partner, number one Forbes, one of the greatest, if not the greatest football agent of all time, but you're still just thinking and making stuff up that can benefit our players, our athletes, our company, the brands. It's nonstop.
Yeah. You know? I don't know any other way to be. It's like the fire's in your belly. So you're always just pushing the envelope. And I think it's how you're wired, and that's how I operate. And so same thing goes true when it comes to recruiting or anything else.
Yeah. No, it makes a ton of fun to work with you because it's just, you never know what's going to happen. You know, I get see you call, I'm like, there's going to be something I've never thought of before, but it's going to be interesting. So go back though to 2001. So you're doing this great marketing. You built up 30, 40 staff members, is that right? And so you built up this company, but you want more, which still hasn't changed. And, so you say, I'm going to do football. That's where you landed for different reasons. But so we started Athletes First in 2001 at the same time. It's not easy to go out and get any client. And I was working with Dave Dunn, and Dave Dunn had been doing it for 10 years. And we had Drew Bledsoe as a client. We had John Lynch as a client. So we had some guys, like the guys, right? But still, you go knock on the door, make a phone call. It's not easy to get in the door. Once you get in the door, everyone wants to sign these guys, and you and I are playing by the rules, so we're not giving money or anything. So that's the disadvantage as well. How many guys did you say you signed in 2 years?
17.
So that's 8.5 per year, according to AJ. That's hard to do now as number one in the world. I keep saying number one in the world. I visit David sitting right there, like, hey, let me go. You and David both tie. We'll call it whatever.
David's come to terms that he's number 4.
But so how did you sign 17 guys? And that's crazy.
And get into how good of players some of these guys are.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of it's luck, obviously. Sometimes you create your own luck. But I, unfortunately, didn't have any relationships or any connections with any scouts or anything. So I was literally going off of Mel Kiper information that was out and available. And I would say, oh, this kid's at Georgia Tech. I'm in Atlanta. He's from Augusta. Let me go recruit him, and let me go get this guy. And so I would go down to Georgia Tech. Well, first of all, back up, I created like a football brochure. Like I tried to put something together that I could actually hand to people. There was nothing football in it. It was all like, oh, we represent these coaches. We did this.
Did Scotty Frame make that for you? You have to do it yourself.
What's that?
Did Scotty Frame do that?
No,
Scotty Frame wasn't born.
Scotty wasn't born yet. Exactly.
So you're doing it by yourself now?
Yeah, 100%. So kind of put it together, and would just go in and honestly would just talk and convince people that I would be the one to be able to represent their family, and it worked. And the first guy I got was a guy named Marino Filia, out of Troy State, and it's the first and last time I've ever spent in a family's living room during the draft. I didn't know any different. That's a whole story for another day, because he was supposed to go much earlier than he did. So it was a long 3 days, and and then from there, this player actually was on the Falcons, and he ended up being friends with another kid who wanted to talk to me. His name was Derek Vaughn at the time. And he was like an electric kick returner, and he ended up changing to me. And I'm still recruiting, and I'm in the heart of, this SEC. And so I'll go to Georgia, and I go to different places, and I sign this unbelievable linebacker at Georgia named Kendrell Bell. Okay. And Kendrell Bell, that year I signed him. He ends up winning Rookie of the Year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Around that time, a veteran player starts to change, or is considering changing to me. His name is Takeo Spikes, Pro Bowl linebacker.
Sure.
He did live next door to me. And so it was a slow breakdown, and then Derek Vaughn had a friend, just a middleman friend, that he said, hey, my friend wants to call you. And I was like, sure. This kid calls me. He's like, hey, my friend's looking for a new agent. His name's Priest Holmes. Would you want to meet with him? And I was like, sure. He was on the Ravens. He just had his first year in Kansas City.
Okay.
And I was like, sure. And so I met him on a Sunday in Atlanta, and he came to my high-rise living complex, and we met in the conference room, in like the club room, right? Priest shows up in a suit for our meeting on a Sunday. I, of course, am not in a suit.
Yep.
I mean, I don't remember what month it was, but I was definitely casual, shorts and a t-shirt, jeans.
I've never seen you in a suit.
No, I know. My bar mitzvah. So I say, oh, hey, Priest, what's going on? He's like, hey. I was like, oh, you just come from church? And he's like, no. I was like, oh, okay. Thinking, wow, you're overdressed for this meeting. But if you know Priest, you understand what a classy guy is. And it made total sense. He was all business. So bizarre when I think about it. I did my presentation to him. literally had no idea what I was really talking about, other than I knew I would be aggressive and I had been certified and all that stuff.
Yep.
I left a FedEx and an SRA with him. I was like, here you go. And if you want to sign with me, like, I guess I gave it to him because a few days later, a FedEx shows up.
Wow.
And it was a signed SRA from Priest. And then, of course, he plays like he played, which was ridiculous. And I think he had 3 years left on his contract. So it was like a whole nightmare situation that I inherited. At the same time, now Takeo Spike switches. Takeo's a legend at the time in the SEC and in the NFL. He's got a lot of peers.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, I kept signing more rookies. And then a lot of veterans started switching because of all of that. And it kept going.
Wow. Didn't you at one point in the draft, did you have like 2 of the big running backs too?
So no, I mean, when I ultimately left and went on my own, my first draft class on my own, I had the.
Got it. So you're there. So this is all, you get all these players under this other company. You've built 30-person staff. You go, and I think a good thing for us to remember as the owners of the company now, you have this young, unbelievable employee, let's call him AJ Stevens, coming up and like asking for a raise, right? Your boss back in the day never answered your question, right? And so what happens? So
talked to my dad,
Yep.
Who's my mentor and best friend, and he said, you got to bet on yourself. You got to leave. It's enough of your loyalty is great, but to a point, you have to be loyal to yourself.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I mean, it was literally a weekend. I wrote literally a 5-page love letter to the owner of the company because I had a great relationship with him, and everything. I never had any intention of leaving or anything like that.
Yep.
If I wasn't going to work for him, I was going to work for my father. That's just what it was going to be. And so I called the owner of the company, met him up on a Saturday or a Sunday at a hotel right by his house, and told him I was leaving and gave him the letter, and I cried, I remember. And I was just, because that was my first real job he gave me the opportunity. I definitely took advantage and made the most of the opportunity. And then I remember him saying, well, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to take the players with you? And I was like, I have no idea. I literally had not any thought of it. And I didn't care because I would never not want to be there for the guys, but it wasn't my motivation, because at the end of the day, if I signed 17 guys with 0 stories, 0 track record, 0 anything, now I have a story, I have a track record, I have clients. I wasn't worried about them going to get more guys.
Yep.
So I really never thought about it.
That's amazing. And it's, I think one thing that I've learned about you during our time together is your loyalty is unbelievable, right? And we'll go through that each stop of the way, but every stop you've made, I feel like you've gone to with the intention of never leaving, which is amazing. And the loyalty to your clients and also the people you work with is unmatched. So you do leave though, and you start your own company called what?
At the time it was FAME, France Athlete Management Enterprises. France Athlete Management Enterprises.
FAME.
Yes, until I got a call from David Falk.
Right. No, we talk about how creative you are, and you go and you start your own company, and you name it after the biggest basketball agency out there.
It was sort of a dead company. He wasn't in the business really anymore. It was dormant, and the legal advice I got was, you're going to be fine.
Oh, good.
Until you sign 3 guys in the top 15, and then all of a sudden that Sports Business Journal is writing about you, and then obviously it draw attention and
absolutely. So this is 2003.
Yes.
So Athletes First, 2 years old. FAME is 0 years old. Your FAME, not David's. And what happens?
Well, first, when I left, I literally called my dad. I was like, oh my God, I left. I did it. Like, he's like, I'm like, what do I do now? Like, I literally had no idea. Oh, yeah. I was not making what I should have made, but in that world, I was still doing well, and had a nice car, single, no kids, had a nice car, living in a townhouse in Buckhead, just like everything was good. And now it's like, oh boy, what am I going to do? And so I wanted to take one of my employees with me.
Yeah.
And a lot of other employees called, and I was like, no, I got to take the necessity, not the luxury. Yeah. And so I called Jennifer, a girl who works with us here at Athletes First, and told her to come over to my house. It was like a Sunday night, and she's like, I'm not coming over to your house. I was like, Jen, come to my house.
How old is Jen at the time?
Oh my God, young.
20s?
Yeah, young 20s. And so Jen comes to my house, and she's like, what's up? And I said, I left the agency. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I'm not staying there without you. And I was like, well, I'd love you to come be my first employee. I was like, whatever you make, I'll pay you. I have no idea about health insurance. You got to do all that stuff. I literally know nothing. Wow. She's like, okay. And I was like, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to the office tomorrow. You're going to tell them, but they're going to, not be happy, and they're going to talk bad about me, and they're going to escort you out. All of the above happened. And so then she shows up at my townhouse, and she's like, well, now what? Like, do you have all the files? And I was like, no. And she's like, do you have any of the players' contracts? I was like, no. I literally had nothing. Yep. I was like, I have a legal pad. I have a calculator. I have a phone. What do you need? She's like, well, we got to go to Staples. So we go to Staples, literally right behind my apartment. And we get a cart and she starts putting things into the cart. As she's putting them in, I'm putting them back on the shelf. I was like, well, why do you need 2 highlighters? Why don't we start with, it's my money. I got no money.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to go off of whatever. So I'm literally putting things back and she's putting them in. We got our stuff. We set up our office in my 3rd floor of my townhouse. I sat on the couch. We had a cordless phone next to me, a real phone next to her. So when people called, she'd answer and she said, 1 minute, I'll get them. Hold on. She'd get me. So call waiting would come in. I'd be like, one second. Throw the phone back to her. She'd be like, France, all for whatever it was. And we literally like did that. And then ultimately called Nike and called the teams and got copies of contracts and just started running the company. Oh, I should back up. I had to call all the players and let them know I left.
Yep.
And let them know I left. And when I did, lucky for me, 17 out of 17 players changed and came to me.
Yep.
And then ensued the lawsuit.
Sure. Been there, actually.
Yeah, lawsuit. And then Sports Business Journal, never forget, came out with the headline of ex-employee raided my firm. And yet there was no quotes from the person who was, you could say raided my firm, but there was no quotes from him. And he, don't get me started. It's 24 years later, it still bothers me. But everyone, of course, printed that out, was trying to kill me in recruiting because my first year on my own, I signed the number 2 pick in the draft, Ronnie Brown, the number 9 pick in the draft, Carlos Rogers, who won the Thorpe Award, and the number 14 pick in the draft, Thomas Davis, and a 4th rounder that same year named Kerry Rhodes, who 3 years later became the highest paid safety in the league.
Sure, yeah. That's crazy. It's also funny. I thought about the similarities between our stories. Like when Dave and I left SMD, we really brought one person. It was Dave's assistant, right? Because that was Aaron Bourne, and that was like she was.
They make us. Yeah, they make us.
To do without her.
Exactly.
Right? And then we were in Dave's living room, and he had his own highlighters, fortunately. But it was crazy. And then, like you said, you announced your departure, and then of course the clients are going to come with you because that's a relationship. Your relationship is hardly ever with the agency, right? Which is one thing we try to change at Athletes First. We want them to feel like they're part of the family, family. Sure, like Dak is going to go wherever you go, but we want him to be proud of the Athletes First family as well. But yeah, and then the Sports Business Journal headlines against us, printing them out, everyone using them against us, and so how did that feel?
I may or may not have used that against you. You may have used mine against me.
No, I didn't even know they existed.
Yeah,
I can't help but hear the 2 stories and just think of the Jerry Maguire scene where he's saying, "Who's coming with me?" Mm-hmm. But in this case, with Athletes First and with you were saying, no, only one of you can come with me. You weren't saying, I want to bring all of you employees with me and start a whole new company. You were saying, hey, we're going to go out on our own because we believe in something different than what's going on here. But I only have room for one employee to come with me. And that's you guys picked out your person.
Yeah. Well, we picked out our person and went to Dave's house. We're living at Dave's house. And then Knox kept coming to the door and kept opening the door. And there's another employee from the football department. Like, what are you doing here? Like, oh, I resigned. I don't want to work there. I want to work with you guys. Like, oh, we have no money. We have no office. We have no plan. We really have no vision. Well, come on in. We got beers in the fridge. You know what I mean? Like,
fit in perfect.
Yeah. Carmen came. Dom came. So that was great. So, okay, you have fame, and you just, so how? Let me ask you this: how did you get those draft picks that first year?
Oh man, I was grinding.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Now it's your company, right?
Oh yeah.
And you've always worked hard, but it's a different gear, right?
I don't know. I felt like I was grinding regardless, but
yeah.
I grind. It was intense. And that year I kept getting this call from this writer who was doing a book called The Draft. And he wanted to follow me. And I said, no, I don't do media stuff. I don't want to do any of that stuff, but it didn't matter. He literally followed me everywhere. And yes, came to the office, and finally he's like, you're a character in my book. I've been following you. Yes. And the book, The Draft, you can read it and go to the index and you'll see 15, 20, 30 pages of my name in it and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
I think he followed some other agents and some different some personnel from a team and whatever it was called, The Draft. Anyways, long story short, I was just grinding, getting these guys to the point where, so I lived in Atlanta. I would go to the jacket walk at Georgia Tech at 9:30 or 10 in the morning for their 12:30 game.
Right.
Just to high five whatever player I was recruiting. Then to drive to Auburn to get there for the end of their game. Go to the visiting team side to see the player I was recruiting from that team. Walk to the side of the stadium. The second I turned the corner, sprint to get to the other side of the stadium where the Auburn team was coming out, to walk out there to be able to see those guys, spend time with those guys, got in my car, drove to Athens to get to the end of the night game there to see the guys. I'd see 5 or 6 teams in one day. I mean, I had no kids, no nothing. So I was grinding. I was with them. And Ronnie Brown's family lived in Cartersville. So that was, an hour and a half outside of Atlanta. I spent a ton of time going up there. I was in Augusta at Carlos Rogers' family. And with Thomas Davis up in Athens, I was always there. And I was in Bessemer, Alabama for Kerry Rose. I was everywhere. Now, everywhere was driving. I had no money to be flying really everywhere in the beginning. So I was driving all hours of the night. My go-to was a Sprite and white cheddar popcorn at the gas station. And I would put water underneath my eyes and put the window down. So that way it would, make me cold a little bit to keep me awake. Talk to my mom on speakerphone until 12:30, 1 in the morning because she didn't want me driving.
Wow.
I mean, it was nonstop. And ironically, funny thing is, in the high rise I lived, another agent, it wasn't the main agent, but another agent at a firm that was in Atlanta lived in the same building I did. And I had to go walk by his car every time to get to my car. And I made it like my mission. Every morning I'd walk by his car and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but I'd be like, the early bird gets the worm. And I would just love beating him to getting out of the house and get to the office to go grind.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. So so you're at Fame. Jennifer is still with you and Athletes First,
yes.
all these years later, right?
24 years.
But then so you're having all the success, you're creating your name for yourself. And then you have Fame for about 8 years, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens? And the story is just crazy every turn, but what happens then?
So I started picking up all these veterans, right? And like you have the Ray Rices and the Dwayne Bowes and like all these different guys, Vernon Davis. I mean, a lot of guys switching. And so the company was doing good. I continued to have first rounders every year, 2 or 3 first rounders every year up until I got a phone call from a billionaire. And he told me that he was interested in purchasing my company. And I ultimately talked to him and ultimately did agree to sell my company to him. And
and what year is this?
2011 or 12? I can't.
Okay.
2011, I think.
So you're how old are you at that time?
40? Yeah, right around that. Right around 40.
So you've had your own company for 8 years.
Yes.
Right. So we've had our company for 24, right? And I think no one was trying to buy our company after 8 years. I think we were trying to get out of bankruptcy after 8 years, right? So how what was that call like? Did you expect that call?
No, I mean, I had a person connected to him that had mentioned like they wanted to or whatever, and so it was awesome. They set up a meeting. They sent their money guy to come talk to me or whatever it was, and then I flew. I think it was to Palm Beach. I think is where I went down to Florida to meet with him, and ultimately ended up selling the company.
And now, so when we did our last deal, which you were a part of with the VCs, like we had investment bankers, we had lawyers, we had everything. Like, describe to me your whole team.
Yes. So it was a private equity company called Todd France. And me and my team, also known as Jennifer, basically took our, QuickBooks program and ran through the numbers. And ultimately, in my creativity, I literally put a proposal together and said, this is what we have. This is what we have. This is where I think it's going. This is how much I want. And this is what I think is fair. And I went in with what I felt was a very fair number.
Did you mention EBITDA at the time?
No, nothing technical. There was nothing like that.
Okay.
No, it was very, very 101.
Yeah.
And ultimately I submitted that. And like a couple of days later, they sent me an email with a counter offer. And it was like a few $100,000 off of what I asked for.
Yep.
And so I was just like, I don't think I should fight that because it was a great offer.
And it was just you and Jen at the time, or did you have other employees?
I had 2 or 3 other people at the time. I don't remember exactly who, but I had a handful of people.
And I'm well going into it, but it was a large number that you sold your company for at a very young age. Like, I mean, and I know your dad was very successful, had his own company, whatnot, but this has to be, had to be a crazy experience.
I literally remember it like yesterday. So I ultimately, their offer was a term sheet.
Yeah.
And I read it like 10 times because I just didn't. I was like, wait, what?
Yep.
What? So, I was like shocked. And I immediately called my wife. She didn't answer her phone. And so I picked up the phone, called my dad. I was like, Dad, are you at the office? He's like, yes. And his office is like 5 minutes from mine. So I printed it out, got in my car, drove to my dad's office. He's sitting at the desk, whatever's finishing a phone call. I sit down in front of him. He's like, "What's up?" And I gave him the sheet. He's reading it, looking at it, and all of a sudden, he just stands up, has tears.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And to be clear though, like the amount that they purchased your company for, had they purchased it and kept it, like it would have been a great deal for them too. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's a great deal for both people. I mean, you're dealing with a billionaire who's a very smart businessman. You are where you are now. Like you were right. Your company was going to continue to explode, but so a win-win for both.
No, for sure it was.
And then, but it wasn't, because what happened?
Oh yeah. So 2 years later, everything's going fine. Building the company, continue to have the same level of players and signing and all that. And ultimately, I got a call from him, and he says, "I'm in the finals, Todd, to buy the Buffalo Bills." I should mention he owned the Buffalo Sabres at the time.
Yeah, it's Terry Pegula.
Yes, Terry Pegula. And he said, "Todd, I'm in the finals to buy the Buffalo Bills against Donald Trump and Bon Jovi. And I feel like I've got more money than both of them combined. So I'm going to win this. So we need to figure out an exit strategy, because obviously there's a conflict of interest. I can't own an NFL team and an agency." Now, for the life of me, to this day, I have no idea why he'd pick a team over owning my little agency.
Yeah.
But hey, yeah, exactly. So 1.4 billion later, he buys the Buffalo Bills. And so he wanted me to see if there would be any other people. First of all, would I buy it back?
Yeah.
Even 50 cents on the dollar. And I wouldn't. I just thought it would be too hard to get back into the marketplace. I felt like the competitors would be like, "Oh, the partner thought, he was this or that," just make up whatever they would do. And I just felt like it was too much. And so I didn't want to do it. And then he said, "Well, I got a list of, billionaires that I want you to tell me which ones you'd want to, have me go talk to or whatever." And I didn't really want any of those guys. I said, "It's not what I signed up for." I said, my thing to him was, I didn't want his dream to become my nightmare.
Yep.
And, that's not what I wanted to have happened. At the same time, I completely understood his dream, right? Owning the Sabres and now having a chance to own the Bill. Unbelievable. And they are the most unbelievable family, great people, like great working relationship. And so I didn't really want to do that. And I put a proposal together that was really nothing.
Yep.
And he called back and said, "Yeah, there's no way. We're just not getting your company back for nothing."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." And so I called my dad and I was like, "It's not going to be me having it back. I don't know who it's going to be. We'll see."
Yep. And
ultimately, him and his wife called me and said, we talked about it, and you're right. Our dream should not become your nightmare. I'm going to have our lawyers drop the paperwork to give the company back to you."
Yeah.
And again, I called my dad, and he was like, "Only you will get you sell your company, and a couple of years later, get it back for nothing."
That's absolutely crazy. It's amazing. That's and we had a similar situation. Our first investor was Tom Gores of Platinum Equity, and just a billionaire or whatnot. And then he was buying the Detroit Pistons, and because we had some basketball involvement, he had to sell back his shares to us. Now, we didn't get it back for free because we didn't have you to do our deal for us, but crazy similarity.
Luck.
But I think also, like, for Mr. Pegula, like that, like that's the type of people they are, right? I mean, it like just amazing family, and you obviously know them far better than I do. But but at the same time, for you, like if I was in your situation, yes, you're a great negotiator, you're driving a bargain, but it's different, right? I mean, because this is your company, it's your baby, it's your family, and you don't want just any billionaire to be, involved, like, because it's personal in that way, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just about trying to sell it and make money or whatever it might be, or get a company back for free. It was really about the players. For me, it was always about the players. And the reason I partnered with Terry to begin with is I thought like they had access, my players could have access to his financial people to evaluate all the different business opportunities that come the players' way, or their own money, and they wouldn't represent the players financially because they don't have enough money for the type of people he was using. Yeah. But I felt like it was a point of difference and it could be a benefit. And the tentacles that a billionaire has with different people, I thought was of value to my players. And so ultimately that was why I picked him as a partner. To end up with some other guy who just buys it because it's fun and his kid wants to come play football in my office, although like I wasn't looking for that. Yeah. And there was no value to that for me, for this, money for me, great, but like what does it do for the players? Because at the end of the day, like every decision I ever make, I always remind myself like why I am where I am is because of the players.
Yep.
Literally. Like that is what it is.
We call that putting the athletes first.
I teed that up for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
No. So now you're a free agent, and you have a choice at this point. You can either stay on your own, right, and you and Jennifer, your team, can keep going, or you can join, a billion different places, but a large conglomerate like CA, which is ultimately what you chose. Why the large conglomerate as opposed to staying on your own?
Well, again, I think for the first time I had felt like what it was like to have the extra resources and versus kind of being the Lone Ranger, and didn't know that I wanted to go back to like having my own, running my own thing, doing the whole thing. And, look, I did get compensated. And so I was kind of like, what's the easiest path here?
Yep.
What's the easiest path? It looks the best, that I can continue to have success and stuff. And on paper, it was CA.
Yep.
And so ultimately, that's who I sold it to.
Which is another place our paths crossed. We didn't know. Like you joined CA in September. In May of that year, we sold 33% of our company to Dentsu. But from like February to May that year, we were in talks with CA. We were in talks with CA about possibly joining their organization and combining our two practices. And, ultimately we went a different direction. But like you, I mean, our talks with CA, they were brief, but they were great. They're very well established. I was talking to Howie Vino, who I thought the world of, and it's a great company, great organization. So I can see why we were both interested. We went our different ways, but then you spent 5 years ahead of football, and obviously you guys had a lot of success. You had a lot of success. Your employment contract ends, and you decide to, like many of our players, take the free agent route. Tell me what that was like to be the free agent finally.
It was crazy. My wife thought it was so awesome and impressive that there were 16 companies that were coming after me, like legit. And I didn't
probably
like it.
More than 16, but only 16 that had a chance, right?
Yeah, 16 that I was
50 that we'd love to have.
16 I was I had like listened to or got message from or whatever. There might have been more, but I actually did not enjoy it. It was for the first time I put myself in the shoes of a recruit. Getting called by 50 agents and marketing people and financial people. I was like, holy cow, like this is what it's like, and as everyone's giving me their pitch and bashing this company, that I'm like, oh my God, is that what a player thinks when an agent bashes this guy and bashes that guy? Like I literally the whole time was looking at it from a recruiting angle as opposed to really listening what they were talking about. I wanted to listen to people because, you never know. But ultimately, this one guy, this one company who I felt a good connection with and liked, and kept talking to, was the one that I ultimately kept talking to. But truly during that time, it was stressful. The only time I was truly like relieved and happy was when I was either sleeping or in the shower. My phone wasn't ringing. I didn't have to tell people no. I felt bad, to telling people certain things, because you're having like true competitors, people who hate you. Right. Or have hated you, have talked such smack about you, are now calling you. And like, that takes a lot. Like, it's not easy to just, hey, I've hated on this guy. Now let me call him and see if he wants to join our team.
Oh, absolutely.
So it was an interesting, very, very interesting process.
And AJ, from my point of view, like we obviously knew who Todd was, right? I mean, but never enter our mind that we'd work with Todd, right? I mean, like, cause that's like the Yankees and the Red Sox, Celtics and Lakers, like you need to have a competitor to go against to make you better. And then through Austin Lyman, he said, hey, like, would you ever want to talk to Todd France? And I'm like, I guess so. But like, this is another kind of lesson, right? Like, I didn't like Todd at all. I had never met him. I didn't like him at all because I just thought he was, I don't know. I didn't like him, right?
Because he was winning.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he was coming second, but but
wait, what?
So but I had two personal interactions with Todd. The first one was at the NFL draft. We're both in the green room, and I'm there with Deshaun Kaiser, and Brian Kelly and everyone. And
who you beat me on in recruiting, Deshaun Kaiser?
Yeah, well, we beat.
That's a whole. It's a whole nother story.
I mean, Cam and I will tell that story, but and came back, but I'm sitting there, and Deshaun Kaiser goes in the second round, and I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, but being in the green room with someone who's not being one of the first 32 picks is terrible, right?
The worst.
And you feel like the whole world's looking at you, and I'm fat and sweaty and everything, and like all of a sudden I feel this like tap on my shoulder. I turn around, it's Todd. I'm like, oh yeah, dude. I like, go ahead, say it. I will punch you in the face right now. It's like, hey man, listen, just so you know, I've been here before. It's a terrible feeling. He's gonna be fine tomorrow. Like, just started consoling me, right? And I'm like, Austin. Okay. Well, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. You know,
I mean, I was knocking on Deshaun's door that night. And by the way,
yeah. Like the next morning, Deshaun was like, "Hey, Todd came by." But
yeah.
but that was really nice. And then the second one, well, I think we were both leaving the combine in Indianapolis from the airport, and our flights had been delayed to Atlanta, and we just kind of saw each other. And Todd came up and started talking, and we were just talking about like life, like his wife and his 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters, whatnot. I'm like, man, like I don't like, but what a nice, personable, funny type of guy. You know what I mean? So when I got the call, like, hey, do you want to go talk to Todd? I remember those 2 instances. I'm like, yeah, we might as well. So Trace Armstrong and I flew down. We met him in a big hotel room in Atlanta. I don't know what time we met, 8 o'clock at night, whatever. But we're there till 4 o'clock in the morning speaking, and like no alcohol, right? So I remember Trace and I leaving, like it's light out. I'm like, well, this is weird, But it's been like 8 hours, 9 hours talking about the whole story you just heard, what Athletes First meant to me, what we were trying to do with Athletes First, what we were both looking for, And it wasn't at that time, it wasn't a sales pitch, right? It was just like, here's who Athletes First is, here's who I am, here's what Trace and I and everyone else trying to build. If that's appealing to you, then we should hear about you. And then Todd told us all about him. It's like we left there like that would be a great fit. I have no idea if this could ever pull this off because it would be 2 Titans coming together, Athletes First and Todd. But we decided to pursue it, and thankfully you weren't there to help him negotiate, but it was hard enough just talking to Todd, and
You would have left money on the table.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably. But one of the issues that we talked about, right, is like, we joke about, but like Athletes First was doing very well. And we had David Mulugeta, right, who was, Todd and David were on their own parallel, and there was everyone else at the time. But, we talked about that. Like, what were your thoughts about David? I don't think you had ever met David, but what was that issue in your mind, or obstacle, or opportunity, or whatever you want to call it?
It's like anything. Like when I went into the Pagula situation, you go in with your eyes wide open and all excited, and you think it's going to be perfect, and then you realize, there's hiccups, whether it's an employee that you inherit or other things, right?
Yeah.
Or you go into the next company and you're like thinking it's going to be awesome, everyone's going to be, and it's not.
Yep.
And so when I had the opportunity, and that was Athletes First, there was other agencies, obviously, and it was another Hollywood agency that was starting football, and was trying to have me come there. And ultimately, like I brought Jen in and Julie, another girl that works with us, and let them give me their input because they are who they help make me who I am. So I wanted their thoughts, and ultimately, Athletes First became sort of the front runner for me and what made the most sense. But yes, a hesitation, no doubt, was David being here, and it wasn't about anything other than like, is this going to be able? Are we going to be able to mesh? Right. I'd heard bad things, all this kind of stuff. Didn't know him, but big reason I ultimately did come was because of David. Ironically, he called me all the time. He was telling me how great it would be, all this kind of stuff. He was like, believer in having it. And I will tell you, one of the best things about being here has been the relationship that I've developed with him, and the trust, and just the back and forth and the fun times we have. And I would have given that a 10% chance of actually really happening at the time I was considering coming here.
Yep.
So ultimately, the biggest concern ended up being the least of my concerns. As a matter of fact, it became a big plus.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I go back to the Joey Harrington, David Carr story we told, right? I mean, so, I sat down with David before even approaching Todd, and he said, well, hey, what do you think about this, right? He's like, well, are you trying to replace me? I'm like, why would we try to replace you? He's like, no, he's kidding. He's like, listen, man. He's like, Murph, I came to Athletes First as an intern. I want to be the best agent there is in the business, but I also want to be part of the best family there is in the business, best agency. And Todd's as good as they come, right? So if you put Todd and I on the same team, like, you guys can go on vacation and just come back and let us take care of business, And say, I love to work with him, but I want to talk to him first. I want to make sure that he feels the same way. And I think you guys had those conversations. You both like, we don't care who gets the credit. We don't care. As long as we can become the best of the best and best there ever was, and that's a dream team we want to be part of,
Yeah. And it didn't take them long to decide that neither of them was going to be Scottie Pippen, and they decided one of them was 23 Michael Jordan and the other was 45 Michael Jordan.
It was me, 23, because I was older, and we gave him 45. Yes.
No.
He did not want to be Pippen, but he was good being the different Michael Jordan.
And so now you've been here 4 years. 2 years ago, we did a deal with the venture capitalist, and you rightfully became an equity partner. And like you said at the beginning of the podcast, to AJ, you do own the place, so you can act any way you want. want. What are your impressions after 4 years being here?
It's everything I hoped it would be. But again, came in really, really cautious just because of previous things, and you hope for all this and you never think it's really going to be that. And I think the number one takeaway is I'm super close with my own family. I live next door to my brother. My my father lives and mom live real close, and my sister. And I think that's super important. I feel like that's how I treat my players. I literally treat them as if they're my sons or my kids or I'm an uncle to them. And so the culture here has been everything you could want and then some. And I've never been a culture guy because I've always been on my own. In previous places I've been, culture really wasn't the thing. I was actually quite the opposite. And so to come here and actually see it and realize you really do have teammates, and these teammates truly want the best for you, and the teammates will help you in any which way, I think is unbelievable. It starts from the top. It's with you. It's what you believe in. It's what you preach. It's what you require, and it happens. So I love that. I also love the fact that my creativity is never going to be squashed. It's actually like, what's your idea? Okay, let's figure out how to make that come to life. Yep. And is it always easy? No, but are all ideas welcome? And do we really try to make those things happen? Absolutely. I mean, you can look at all the different things this agency does. And so for those reasons, like it's been an unbelievable experience. It's been great. And most importantly, like not only for me, but my staff, which is important because again, they make me. Yep. And then even more important than them is the people you put first, which is the athletes. And I think that when I've put them, I feel very confident I've put them in the best possible place and surrounding them with the best possible people and all the best possible resources. And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, like everything for me is about the players.
Yep. No, and we, one of our mantras is better together, right? And there's no question that over the last 4 years, you and the people you brought with you, you've made Athletes First so much better. You've made me a lot better. I mean, you've pushed the heck out of me, you challenged me. You won't settle for mediocrity. You won't settle for anything but brilliance in our results. And I appreciate that. I mean, I think you've made David better. David made you better. Like you guys compete, but you collaborate, and it's been awesome. And Athletes First wouldn't be doing a podcast today. There's no way we'd be doing a podcast today without your influence. I know you're not a big podcast by it, but just thinking outside the box and how can we do different things to make us different it's been awesome. So in our next episode, we're going to get into your actual clients, and we're going to jump into Dak Prescott and the 2 record-setting deals you do with Dak, and it's going to be great. But I'd like to end each podcast with our kind of lessons learned, through a sponte, whatnot. And AJ makes me go first, so I'll go first. And I think the lesson I learned, and I might have said this in one of my previous podcasts, but you hear Todd talk about his brother and following his brother to college, and going to his dad's office and talk to his mom on the phone and stuff like that. And people make fun of me because I always, when I talk about Athletes First, it's family. And people are like, dude, you're a sports agent. There's no way that family's important to you guys, but it is. It's everything to me. And I think, you look at Todd and you look at the success you've had, and again, no one's had the success that you've had. And, why have you been so successful? And there's a lot of different reasons. One of them sitting next to you, but, I think the main reason, and if I had to guess, the main reason you've been so successful is you treat everyone around you like their family. Like you have every reason to not treat people the same as you. You have every reason to feel that in some ways you're better than them, or you're the boss, or whatever it is. But whether it's your clients, whether it's your staff, whether it's your partners, whether it's my wife, my kids, you just treat everyone like their family, and you exude that positivity and that happiness, and just that, hey man, we're all in this together, and whether it's good or bad, we're going to win, and I have no doubt with you on our side, we're going to continue to win. But I think it goes back to the lesson that we started the very first step, family is important, man. That family gives you a power. And when you treat people like family, you make them feel like family, they're going to do more for you than if they're just a high paid employee or even a friend. Right. So I think the power of family is huge. And that wasn't what I thought we were going to really dive into today, but you personify that. So that's awesome, man. I appreciate you, bringing that whole thing to what was already a family, bringing that to a whole new level. That's awesome. So AJ, any lessons from your boss?
Yeah, I think the takeaway. Okay, I think the lesson takeaway that I have from Todd's story is really the importance of a mentor. Through every twist and turn that you have in your career, you always went back to the same person. In your case, it was your dad, where you had that person you could come back to and say, here are all the things going on. Here's my options. What should I do? And it's, just looking for someone for some sort of guidance, and the importance of having that person in your life. In your case, it's your dad. For other people, it can be,
Your case,
any
it's
other
Todd.
person. Yeah. In my case, it's Todd. No, my dad. But it's a super important aspect of anyone's growth in a career, in life, and anything. And I think that your story personifies that.
Yeah, I've never made any decisions without talking to my dad. Like the only decision I made without talking to my dad was not going to join his law firm, which he still begrudges me for. But yeah, that's a great point, AJ. Todd, close it with your life lessons learned today.
Well, I'm a huge podcast fan. No, I mean, I don't know about the lessons. I think everything I talked about, I feel like I'm a very grounded person. Like I never forget where I came from. I never forget what put me here. And I never forget, what I wake up for every day in terms of who I work for, which is the players. And so for me, just listening to the questions and then replaying the stories of my history, over and over, it reminds me, like, to anybody who's doing anything to get anywhere, it doesn't happen overnight.
Yep.
It takes relentless effort, tireless work, a few lucky breaks, and getting in bed, hopefully with the right people. And at the end of
figuratively.
I have so many comments. I'm just gonna go ahead and just stay above board on this. But at the end of the day, I think that it just is very humbling and thinking about all this stuff. Like I said, I didn't know the stats. I don't ever think about that. Like for me, I've always been a guy who just puts their head down and grinds. I expect the results.
Yep.
So I'm never like surprised with them because I only expect them. I'll be surprised if something didn't work. And so I feel very fortunate with the people who helped me get to where I am and the people that I'm surrounded with today. So I'd say that's my takeaway.
That's awesome. And I think one thing we've learned from these podcasts is like, it's fun going down memory lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's fun is like because we don't really we don't have a lot of time to think about like what we did when we first opened the office or whatnot. But not only is it fun for us, hopefully, but that's one reason we want to do this podcast is because like it wasn't like you started with like you didn't grow up with a next door neighbor who was a star quarterback or something like that, right? I mean, you have gone from a well-dressed employee for Ant's Thrasher team, whatever it was, right? To one of the best agents of all time, if not the best agent of all time. And but there's a lot of work there, but like anyone can do it. They just have to they take these lessons. And I think that's why we want to share our stories is like, hey man, like just get going, just get started. You have a dream, chase out, whether it's a sports agent or any other profession, like put your head down, work your ass off, be creative. Don't take no for an answer. Just go. So it's awesome, man. It was, I love hearing your story. It's amazing. You inspire me. You inspire everyone at Athletes First, and I can't wait to the next podcast. Maybe more you and AJ talking about Dak Prescott's 2 deals, and we thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me.
All right, see you next time.